So, greetings, dear friends, and thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Aging While Black Live. Uh, as I've shared with you on a number of occasions, and I really want to ground our conversation in this reality of what aging while black is. And I appreciate the interest that so many of you have shown in understanding and grasping and engaging with this effort. And so, aging while black is a multifaceted platform that elevates the voices of black elders by amplifying their stories, perspectives, and realities. We generate and are focused on collective learning and collective action around the systemic inequities that are faced by aging Black people in order to co-create policy and people-driven responses for a better quality of life. And that is Aging While Black. We invite you to follow us on all of our socials, to join our Facebook group, to go to our website at agingwhileblack.co, sign up for our communications, become a part of the community, take the quiz, join us in this movement that we are seeking to build. Today, I am extremely excited to welcome my colleague and friend, LaVerne Toombs, to Aging While Black Live. Greetings, LaVerne, and welcome.
I thank you so much, Raymond. I greatly appreciate the opportunity to be on with you today and talk about a movement, as you mentioned, Aging While Black. I'm really looking forward to the dialogue and really hope that we can bring forth more awareness regarding the inequities when it comes to individuals of color, and especially the population of those of elderly.
Thank you so much. And so, over the last few days, as we have talked about this conversation, we've shared just a tidbit. We've scratched the surface about you and your work. How would you introduce yourself to the Aging While Black community?
Well, that's a very good question, Raymond. And first of all, I'm a 63-year-old Black woman. So I consider myself a part of the aging population, right? But more importantly, over the past, I would say, span of 2 decades, I have had the privilege and honor to work in government on the federal level as well as on a local level. And not only that, but been involved in a nonprofit work, being that public servant, but also an individual with a servant heart. So if I had to introduce myself in a way, that would be someone who is purpose driven, also mission driven, and as well as about living the actual assignment that was assigned to me upon birth or before birth. I'm very passionate about the community. I'm always about causes that I think that would be impactful and inspirational, but most importantly, to give individuals hope and opportunities. So when I think about this very topic that we're going to discuss today regarding Aging While Black, it is a movement, and I am so excited as well as honored to allow my skill sets that I have been so gracious to learn over the years and have utilized for the benefit of others. So I'm looking forward to that and hope and pray that, the gifts that have been given, that they be utilized in a way that would be impactful and inspirational to individuals who will benefit from it.
Thank you. And so, one of the questions that we ask everybody in this space is what does the concept aging while Black bring to mind for you?
Well, when I think about Aging While Black, it's a conversation that individuals do not want to have. And that is when we talk about aging, right? We do everything, we can talk about everything else except about the time that we begin to grow older, or the fact that we don't want to be called elderly, or the word old. And so when I think about Aging While Black, it really stimulates a conversation as well as a thought process regarding what does it really mean when we talk about Aging While Black? What is the true definition of that? And to have this type of dialogue, as I mentioned earlier, is it really causes people to have a better understanding, no matter if you're 20, 30, 40 years old or whatever the age, to really look at aging differently. And so that's the way that I see it in regards to aging while Black, is to begin to embrace aging, but more importantly, to have a different type of mindset and discussion in regards to what is aging. So that, to me, when we talk about aging while Black, what does that really mean? And how can we change the narrative when it comes down to the word aging while Black,
Thank you.
and understanding
Yeah,
the impacts that it has, especially when it comes to people of color?
thanks, LaVerne. So you have an active, a very active social media profile highlighting your aging journey. Why?
Well, that's, Raymond, and that's how basically we were connected, right? Someone asked me a question and I told them, that I'm really focused on this aging. And I had no idea that this was something that you were doing. And so it's amazing how we're connected interests. So my daughter, actually, who is very active on social media as well, she and I began to just talk about her turning 40 and me being 60 plus years old. And she said, Mom, when I'm on social media, I really don't see women really talking about, their whole idea of their life as they age. And I began to really think long and hard about that. And I said, you're right. So I went on social media and began to kind of investigate and see if there were any other individuals out there showing their life at 60 plus. There were a few. And so I began to create these reels of me in my fashion, my life of fashion, which I enjoy and love dearly. My activities that I'm involved, my travels, my grandkids, my children, just talk about how I have embraced being 60 plus, and would hope that it would inspire and motivate other women that are older or aging, if you will, to embrace it and still live. Just because we have reached a certain age does not mean that we stop living. In my opinion, I think that's when we start living in my whole idea, right? Here I am. When I turned 60, I decided to do something that maybe younger people would do, and that is I got a tattoo. Now, of course, that may be a little bit extreme for some, but at the end of the day, I just want to change this narrative. I don't feel, or do I look as though I'm 63 years old. I don't even like the idea of hearing people talk about old, right? And so I really, it goes back to what I said earlier. How do we change this whole narrative about aging? When we have all these products that keep us wanting to look young and all sorts of things, because that's society, right? But it's more than just about cosmetic, but there's other inequities that are out there that impact individuals of color, especially those that are aging. But I just think that that was so important, and I have women. Matter of fact, a couple of weeks ago, I had a lady I don't even know who follows me on social media, and she says, "LaVerne, I watch you on social media, and you are such an inspiration that I've decided to start walking every day." And she said, "I feel so much better and healthier." So I was like, "Wow, at least I touched one person with the reels." So that's what this is all about.
So thank you for that. And though I don't do it often, uh, when you talked about being 60 and getting your tattoo, I think I shared with you that it was actually 66 for me when I got my first one. The comment that you made about uh, the work that you are doing and in aging and how you are looking at your love for fashion and your family, your travels, and other things. So, how do you expect or anticipate that your skills, your experiences, and the networks that you've built over the years in all of these roles that you've occupied Uh, how do you think all of that will show up as you navigate the aging space?
Well, one is, being in government, just as you have served as well, you learn learn the process of how laws are put in place or how you begin to look at changing policy and having those conversations with key individuals in on the federal, state, and local level. And so one of the skill sets that I hope that I would have the opportunity is to speak to those individuals about looking at policy and how can we change policy when it impacts health related issues regarding individuals of color with health, housing, transportation, all those different types of inequities or disparities that we talk about all the time. And people of color across the board are impacted by it. But when it comes to individuals who are aging, it's more of a priority, in my opinion, because as we age, different things begin to happen to us, especially when it comes to our health. And not only that, but people of color, when we have all these different types of health issues from diabetes and heart disease and prostate when men and breast cancer, which is a high number of people of color other than our counterparts, you really need to begin to have those conversations. So that would be one. Secondly, of course, funding is always a need. And so again, if there's ways that we can bring awareness to these major corporations out there and identify funding sources to bring forth awareness and create programs and initiatives that would impact individuals, especially Asian while Black, and those individuals who are impacted in that area. I think that's one way. And of course, I've been doing that line of work for many, many years. The other thing, of course, is just connecting the dots and just being a voice, right? This is a movement. And it's a movement in a way where we can begin to have conversations. And I thought, Raymond, what you did a couple of weeks ago in Baton Rouge, where the old school met the new school and began to start having that dialogue, was just phenomenal. Because actually, I believe that a number of the new school began to look at the old school differently, right? And even though it was only a short time, but those type of dialogues, in my opinion, is something that needs to be had, not only just with that particular group, but individuals who are key influencers in our communities. Secondly, as I shared with you, Raymond, last week I went on I guess if you will, an African American tour. I was in Montgomery, I was in Selma, I was in Henning, Tennessee, and Brownsville, Tennessee. And as I shared with you, when I began to look at these communities, that's another type of conversation when we talk about Asian while Black, that these are communities that are highly populated by people of color. But I see these small rural communities are falling by the wayside because the younger people are leaving those communities. And unfortunately, our Asian population are passing on, and the communities are just dying, just wasting away. And so, how do we begin to have those dialogues with individuals who look at Main Street projects or programs or other types of initiatives to bring these communities back in vibrant and back in commerce, if you will, and increase their tax base so that they're able to generate? And then lastly, food insecurities. There's a lot of conversation now in regards to food insecurities, where there are communities that have been identified as food deserts and drug deserts. And unfortunately, these communities impact our aging population. So how do we get that message out there regarding these food deserts and begin to have conversation with major corporations out there to consider grocery stores and not these corner convenience stores that primarily sell high sugar content and other items that's not healthy, but are set in our communities. So there's a lot of issues, Raymond, but we got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and so you did mention a number of issues, and I'd like to just put put some of them as I heard them back before you, because we do have to start somewhere, and so I'm interested in your thoughts on how we, as passionate and concerned people, might begin to respond. What jumps up for you? How might in our thinking about aging while Black, we make certain to center some of these things. And so you talked about food insecurity, food and access to care, drugs and medicine and other access to care. You talked about the decaying and declining rural communities that are uh, densely populated with Black elders and as young people move away. You also mentioned housing and economics and other policy concerns. And so when you think about all of these issues, uh, for you, where do we start?
Well, I think that you've already began, Raymond, and that is having conversation about aging while Black. Because again, as I stated earlier, this is not a conversation that we are accustomed to talk about, right? We don't want to talk about aging. And so what this is going to do, one, is begin to stimulate thought process and cause people to really think about aging and possibly look at it differently. But then also we can begin to look at, have conversation about, policy, advocating on particular issues that you mentioned earlier. But again, you know, I, for me, is creating an environment where people feel comfortable to talk about aging, but in a way where it brings forth change. For instance, to give you an example, just this weekend, and it may not mean very much, but to me, it really caused me to think. This weekend, my granddaughter wanted to jump on me or something like that. My daughter was on the phone and she said, "Well, you can't do that because Mimi is old." So when I heard that word old, now my granddaughter, in my opinion, will be looking at me old. But I guess my point I'm making here is that how do we change the definition of old? How do we change the language? And that's the way that I see Aging While Black is changing the whole conversation again. And I can't say this enough about aging. And so you've already started this, Raymond, with the conversation. And then secondly, in regards to the event that you had the other day, you began to have that dialogue where you brought the new and the aging together to have conversation, and how do we continue to continue that engagement. And then number three, um, this platform, this type of platform right here, in regards to Zooms or podcasts or Facebook Live, to begin to send this message out, right? Begin to write blogs, begin to connect with major organizations that are possibly having conversations about aging, but maybe not in regards to a focus of aging while Black. So I know I named quite a few things there, but at the end of the day, we really want to put a lot of emphasis, in my opinion, as Aging While Black is a movement. And I know that you have those three pillars that you talk about, those three categories, and really helping individuals understand those three pillars. Pillars,
So let
pillars.
Thanks. And so let's wrap it up there, Laverne. So as you've mentioned, so Aging While Black seeks to be this catalyst for movement building. And we center that movement building around these three pillars that you mentioned. The first is recalibrating the village. This notion that uh, the infrastructure that supports Black life is totally insufficient and ill prepared for the aging, major aging shift that has already begun. The second pillar is embracing innovation and rapid change. How do we make the most of the technological advances in ways that improve the quality of life of Black elders? And leaning into the spirit of Sankofa, leaning into Sankofa, that the wisdom of the elders is invaluable and ought be uh, intentionally present in our communities, families, etc. And so, as we seek to be a catalyst for a movement that's built around these three pillars, what's your best hope as you've begun to kind of stick your toe, if you will, into the aging wild Black waters? What's your best hope?
Well, my best hope is that we can bring forth change through policy. Number one. Number two is to change how we define aging. And number three, embracing our aging by having a more positive view of what aging is and accepting it. Because there's so much negativity when it comes to the Asian community and aging. I mean, that's across the board. And so it is my hope that through the work that you're doing, having this dialogue and conversation, the dialogue regarding aging while Black, that we can bring forth some change. And I realize that it's not going to be, it's not easy, right? Because change is somewhat difficult, and it all depends on, whomever the mindset of in regards to change. But you're making a step, right? And so that change, in my opinion, it can be very impactful and beneficial, and that is just to change the whole mindset in regards to aging.
From as a wise person said around me once, from your lips to God's ears, may it be so. Uh, and so, LaVerne Toombs, thank you so much for joining us for this conversation. I suspect that it is the first of many that we will have about this whole notion of aging while Black. And so, thank you so much for your time and for sharing with us.
Well, thank you, Raymond. And I must admit, during our conversations, I have a greater appreciation, believe it or not, in regards to aging. I have embraced it even more. So I want to
Uh,
pass it on to others. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And guys, thank you for taking the time to watch this conversation. My hope is that it will inspire you in some way, that you will join this movement of aging while Black, and that we'll see you the next time that we show up in this space. In the meantime, God's blessings upon you. Thank you.
Thank you.